Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 1, through chapter 3, verse 22. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Futile, futile, laments the teacher. Absolutely futile. Everything is futile. What benefit do people get from all the effort which they expend on earth? A generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains the same through the ages. The sun rises and the sun sets. It hurries away to a place from which it rises again. The wind goes to the south and circles around to the north. Round and round the wind goes, and on its rounds it returns. All the streams flow into the sea, but the sea is not full. And to the place where the streams flow, there they will flow again. All this monotony is tiresome. No one can bear to describe it. The eye is never satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear ever content with hearing. What exists now is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing truly new on earth. Is there anything about which someone can say, "Look at this, it is new"? It was already done long ago, before our time. No one remembers the former events, nor will anyone remember the events that are yet to happen. They will not be remembered by the future generations. I, the teacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. I decided to carefully and thoroughly examine all that has been accomplished on earth. I concluded, God has given people a burdensome task that keeps them occupied. I reflected on everything that is accomplished by man on earth, and I concluded, everything he has accomplished is futile, like chasing the wind. What is bent cannot be straightened, and what is missing cannot be supplied. And I thought to myself, I have become much wiser than any of my predecessors who ruled over Jerusalem. I have acquired much wisdom and knowledge. So I decided to discern the benefit of wisdom and knowledge over foolish behavior and ideas. However, I concluded that even this endeavor is like trying to chase the wind. For with great wisdom comes great frustration. Whoever increases his knowledge merely increases his heartache. I thought to myself, come now, I will try self-indulgent pleasure to see if it's worthwhile. But I found that it also is futile. I said of partying, it is folly, and of self-indulgent pleasure, it accomplishes nothing. I thought deeply about the effects of indulging myself with wine. All the while my mind was guiding me with wisdom, and the effects of behaving foolishly, so that I might discover what is profitable for people to do on earth during the few days of their lives. I increased my possessions. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I designed royal gardens and parks for myself, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I constructed pools of water for myself to irrigate my grove of flourishing trees. I purchased male and female slaves, and I owned slaves who were born in my house. I also possessed more livestock, both herds and flocks, than any of my predecessors in Jerusalem. I also amassed silver and gold for myself, as well as valuable treasures taken from kingdoms and provinces. I acquired male singers and female singers for myself, and what gives a man sensual delight, a harem of beautiful concubines. So I was far wealthier than all my predecessors in Jerusalem. Yet I maintained my objectivity. I did not restrain myself from getting whatever I wanted. I did not deny myself anything that would bring me pleasure, so all my accomplishments gave me joy. This was my reward for all my effort. Yet, when I reflected on everything I had accomplished, and on all the effort that I had expended to accomplish it, I concluded, all these achievements and possessions are ultimately profitless, like chasing the wind. There's nothing gained from them on earth. Next, I decided to consider wisdom, as well as foolish behavior and ideas. For what more can the king's successor do than what the king has already done? I realized that wisdom is preferable to folly, just as light is preferable to darkness. The wise man can see where he is going, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I also realized that the same fate happens to them both. So I thought to myself, the fate of the fool will happen even to me. Then what did I gain by becoming so excessively wise? So I lamented to myself, The benefits of wisdom are ultimately meaningless. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be remembered for very long, because in the days to come both will already have been forgotten. Alas, the wise man dies, just like the fool. So I loathed life, because what happens on earth seems awful to me, for all the benefits of wisdom are futile, like chasing the wind. So I loathed all the fruit of my effort, for which I worked so hard on earth, because I must leave it behind in the hands of my successor. Who knows if he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will be master over all the fruit of my labor, for which I worked so wisely on earth. This also is futile. So I began to despair about all the fruit of my labor, for which I worked so hard on earth. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. However, he must hand over the fruit of his labor as an inheritance to someone else who did not work for it. This also is futile, and an awful injustice. What does a man acquire from all his labor and from the anxiety that accompanies his toil on earth? For all day long his work produces pain and frustration, and even at night his mind cannot relax. This also is futile. There is nothing better for people than to eat and drink and to find enjoyment in their work. I also perceived that this ability to find enjoyment comes from God, for no one can eat and drink or experience joy apart from Him. For to the one who pleases Him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy, but to the sinner He gives the task of amassing wealth, only to give it to the one who pleases God. This task of the wicked is futile, like chasing the wind. For everything, there is an appointed time, and an appropriate time for every activity on earth. A time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot what was planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search, and a time to give something up as lost, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to rip, and a time to sow, a time to keep silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. What benefit can a worker gain from his toil? I have observed the burden that God has given to people to keep them occupied. God has made everything fit beautifully in its appropriate time, but He has also placed ignorance in the human heart so that people cannot discover what God has ordained from the beginning to the end of their lives. I have concluded that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to enjoy themselves as long as they live, and also that everyone should eat and drink and find enjoyment in all his toil, for these things are a gift from God. I also know that whatever God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can taken away from it. God has made it this way so that men will fear Him. Whatever exists now has already been, and whatever will be has already been, for God will seek to do again what has occurred in the past. I saw something else on earth. In the place of justice there was wickedness, and in the place of fairness there was wickedness. I thought to myself, God will judge both the righteous and the wicked, for there is an appropriate time for every activity, and there is a time of judgment for every deed. I also thought to myself, it is for the sake of people, so God can clearly show them that they are like animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals are the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Both have the same breath. There is no advantage for humans over animals, for both are fleeting. Both go to the same place. Both come from the dust, and to dust both return. Who really knows if the human spirit ascends upward, and the animal spirit descends into the earth? So I perceived there is nothing better than for people to enjoy their work, because that is their reward, for who can show them what the future holds? There's Solomon, being a ray of sunshine. So, this book of Ecclesiastes is written with the premise of things that occur under the sun. That is, I guess, the deeds that occur in this life, excluding a concept of eternity, I believe. And so Solomon here is examining for himself, and it's written it down for our benefit, that he's examining the activities that go on here under the sun. Apart from eternity, and describes it as futile. That pleasure is futile. Gathering knowledge and wisdom is futile. For with great wisdom comes great frustration. Whoever increases his knowledge merely increases his heartache. And things like the wise and the fool both share a common fate. That is, they'll both die in the end. Very, I'd say, nihilistic perspective. That is, a perspective that sees ultimately that we're to die, and so doesn't derive any meaning out of our existence here on earth. That ultimately, no matter how wisely or indeed foolishly you act, people will soon forget your name, and everything that you worked so hard to amass here on earth will be given to somebody else. So, it's a bleak perspective, for sure, but I think a realistic for one, as far as one that excludes a concept of eternity. So, I think it was Paul who was saying, oh goodness, I'd like to get it right here. The one where it's tomorrow we die kind of thing, eat and drink. Is that? Yeah, that's 1 Corinthians. Yeah. 1 Corinthians 15:32. If from a human point of view I fought with wild beasts at Ephesus, what did it benefit me? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Essentially, the conclusion that, well, one of the conclusions that Solomon came to, Ecclesiastes 3:12, I've concluded that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live, and also that everyone should eat and drink and find enjoyment in all his toil, for these things are a gift from God. Yeah, so, but this is all from the point of view of if there's no resurrection from the dead. So, carrying on, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. Now, because we are fellow workers, we also urge you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, I heard you at the acceptable time, and in the day of salvation I helped you. Look, now is the acceptable time. Look, now is the day of salvation. We do not give anyone an occasion for taking an offense in anything, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But as God's servants, we have commended ourselves in every way with great endurance, in persecutions, in difficulties, in distresses, in beatings, imprisonments, in riots, in troubles, in sleepless nights, in hunger, by purity, by knowledge, by patience, by benevolence, by the Holy Spirit, by genuine love, by truthful teaching, by the power of God, with weapons of righteousness, both for the right hand and for the left, through glory and dishonor, through slander and praise, regarded as impostors, and yet true, as unknown, and yet well known, as dying, and yet, see, we continue to live, as those who are scourged, and yet not executed, as sorrowful, but always rejoicing, as poor, but making many rich, as having nothing, and yet possessing everything. We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians. Our heart has been opened wide to you. Our affection for you is not restricted, but you are restricted in your affection for us. Now, as a fair exchange, I speak as to my children, open wide your hearts to us also. Pretty awesome. The seemingly paradoxical nature of Christian living and subsisting on God. Just the juxtaposition of the both of the two ends of the spectrum. That is, unknown, well known, dying, we live, scourged, not executed, sorrowful, but rejoicing, poor, but making many rich, having nothing, yet possessing everything. Really kind of a cool passage. Yeah. I wonder, was it the Corinthians who had the issue with the super apostles? Because, well, Paul's affirming his love is, Paul's affirming his integrity in the beginning of chapter 1 there. So it seems that the Corinthians are questioning Paul's integrity and his apostolic ministry. So I think this is part of the reason why Paul says to them, our affection for you is not restricted, but you are restricted in your affections for us. So a one-sided relationship. So yeah, certainly Paul's endeavoring hard to, in his ministry, to win as many souls as he can. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 46, verses 1 through 11. God is our strong refuge. He is truly our helper in times of trouble. For this reason, we do not fear when the earth shakes, and the mountains tumble into the depths of the seas, when its waves crash and foam, and the mountains shake before the surging sea. Selah. The river's channels bring joy to the city of God, the special, holy dwelling place of the Sovereign One. God lives within it. It cannot be moved. God rescues it at the break of dawn. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms are overthrown. God gives a shout. The earth dissolves. The Lord who commands armies is on our side. The God of Jacob is our protector. Selah. Come, witness the exploits of the Lord, who brings devastation to the earth. He brings an end to wars throughout the earth. He shatters the bow and breaks the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Stop your striving and recognize that I am God. I will be exalted over the nations. I will be exalted over the earth. The Lord who commands armies is on our side. The God of Jacob is our protector." Selah. The psalmist recognizes God as a defender and a refuge for his people. Pretty intense imagery. the earth shaking, mountains tumbling into the depths of the sea, waves crashing and foaming. And finally, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. Yeah, it's important to discipline your children. Okay, well, thank you for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.